George, you've reported this week that a new left-wing party could scupper Labour in the next election. What did you discover?
There have been rumours for a while of a new Corbynite party, and you've also got the eco-populist leader, Zack, who is the favourite to win the Green Party leadership. And I got hold of some exclusive polling from More in Common, where they looked at how a new Corbyn-led party would perform. What they found is it would win 10% of the vote, which is striking. That's from a standing start. That's before you've had a publicity blitz of a new party being formed. And they take 3 points off Labour, perhaps less than you'd expect, though some say that shows how many left-wing voters they've lost already. But it would put them down at 20%, level with Kemi Badenoch's Moribund Conservatives, and give Reform a 7-point lead. So what I think this shows is a volatile electoral landscape. And there is an appetite amongst some voters. I wouldn't want to overstate how many, because in national terms, Corbyn is an unpopular figure. But he has a loyal, politically engaged following amongst left-wing voters, some of whom aren't voting for anyone at the moment, which I think could be mobilised and could do damage to Labour, given how slim many of their majorities are.
Yeah, I mean, does this put the left in the left behind, Andrew? These are voters that Labour have taken for granted, and now they could leave them in droves like we saw with the Red Wall.
I think this is an intriguing possibility. But I think one note of caution would be that I think at the next election, the great argument is going to be, do you or do you not want Nigel Farage to be Prime Minister? Do you want a radical reform revolution sweeping the country? And if you feel not, then people are going to huddle around or gather around the Labour Party as the main alternative to that, which is why I don't think it's going to topple Labour in the end, a new left-wing group. I think it would, in the current circumstances, it would be very, very much the politics of Palestine and Gaza. It would be very much based around that. And I think it would have to be the politics of much higher taxation. And I think, given the rate of taxation in the country at the moment, I would be sceptical as to whether it really broke through to 10% or 15%.
Right, because Labour MPs, Sadiq Khan, MPs in constituencies in London or with high Muslim populations are worried about losing these votes.
I think Labour's facing a threat on multiple fronts. I agree with Andrew. Reform will be their foremost opponents, and they will be able to attract some tactical votes on that basis. Under this scenario, Keir Starmer, a bit like Mark Carney in Canada or Anthony Albanese in Australia, manages to mobilise an anti-populist coalition, wins re-election. That's the positive scenario. The negative scenario is that his fate looked more like that of Olaf Scholz, the Social Democrat who's routed in Germany, where you lose votes in all directions. You lose them on the right, you lose them on the left to Die Linke. The Greens still have a presence. And that's the risk for Keir Starmer. There's the threat of a new left-wing party. There's the Greens, who could be more prominent and active under a new leader. But there's also the Gaza Independents. So they won 4 seats at the last election. And I spoke to a senior figure in the party this week who said there was a real and deep-rooted problem between Labour and Muslim communities. This is not a passing protest vote in the way Iraq was. This is a far deeper schism. And Luke Trill of More in Common said conversations with Muslim voters in focus group, it reminds me of conversations with Red Wall voters around the time of the Brexit vote, where there's a realignment going on, a sense of it's not just Gaza, but a sense that this government isn't for us anymore. And they're gravitating towards people who they see as their community and local champions. Forecasts vary, but some think Labour could lose certainly a dozen seats to Gaza independents. Some suggest 25 seats. So again, it's this compendium of electoral woes, and you put them all together and you suddenly see how Labour's sandcastle majority could be washed away.
In this context, we are moving towards very dark politics indeed, because as I was writing this week, if you look at Farage and Reform, at the moment on economics, it's quite hard to say whether they are a more left-wing or a more right-wing party. They're talking about nationalisation, they're talking about, big promises on tax, they're talking about big public spending, they are generally noticed that their own voters are quite pro-welfare. So you can see, it's messy. But they're not a sort of Reaganite or Thatcherite small state party at the moment. The real gap at the moment is on community or race or migration or however you describe it. And I think you can see Reform really, really punching the bruise of illegal migration, punching the bruise of white working class voters. And in the context of that, having sort of pro-Gaza, pro-Muslim politics on the other side, it could get really, really unpleasant.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to say, having reported on recent by-elections like in Batley and Rochdale, for example, that just gets so toxic so quickly. I mean, imagine that on a larger scale across all of the seats that we've been discussing.
That could very well be where we're heading.